Hello and welcome to the Motor Racing Passion Podcast, brought to you by Breakthrough Health and Wellness. I'm Luke Blattman along with Daniel Blattman and Brock Schaefer, and we're discussing today the recent Bathurst 12hr of 2022. The 12hr is our favourite Australian race of the year for all of us, and we had an awesome couple of days up there camping. Daniel and Brock have been to all of the GT3 12hrs since 2011. Adam's worked on a number of cars there over the years and spectated at a number of them. And the only one I've missed since 2012 has been 2016. And after we all missed 2021, how did we all feel about getting back there? Did you miss it as much as you thought, Daniel?
Yes, to be fair. I went in fairly, not expecting a heap, to be honest. Usually go through Christmas, go through the early part of January, and that's all you're thinking about is that race. I can't say I had the same feelings going into May, especially with all the stilted build up to it. But driving in the gates and setting up in the campgrounds and watching the cars roll out on Friday. It was I won't say just like previous times because it wasn't 45 degrees, but no, it was it was great to have it back.
I missed it more than I thought I did, and like Daniel, I went in excited but cautious of a very small entry list, but as soon as I got there, the excitement levels were just as high as normal, and once again, it just never lets us down. It's great.
Obviously, it's always usually in February, so it's always sort of the first race we see every year. So sort of you spend Christmas, New Year just looking forward to getting there. And then I felt, and obviously we missed it last year. I remember in the usual weekend in 2021, we all spent the weekend, Bathurst would usually be on, saying that we were watching old ones. And then the same thing happened this year. And by the time it rolled around to May, given all the other racing that's on, it sort of crept up in a way, and sort of all of a sudden it was like, oh, geez, it's Bathurst week. But once you get back up there and you see the people you normally see in the campground and everything, it almost felt like it hadn't been 2 years in some ways, because everyone just fell back into the same conversations and the same fun. I just remember on the Friday when it was the first 12-hour session and the first car came around, and I think it was the Sun Energy car was the first car that came past. The same feelings come back, just like, this is awesome. I'm glad I'm here. We wouldn't have missed it for the world. Well, like all of us know that the race will be back to full strength in 2023, and all of us can't wait to get back up there. But for this year, sort of the main talking point leading into the weekend was the entry list with only 20 starters. And if we focus on the GT3 part of the entry list to start with, was the criticism warranted?
For mine, I was actually pretty relieved / excited that there were 15 GT3 cars there. I was thinking we might have been looking at, somewhere between 6 to 10. So when I saw 15 arrive on the entry list, I was pretty enthused. What I guess for mine, where the criticism was valid, was just the lack of diversity amongst those 15 cars. I think off the quick top of my head, it was 7 Audis, 6 Mercedes, 1 Porsche, and 1 Lambo. And to be fair, there's more diversity in a Liberal front bench than that. So that was pretty disappointing. But I guess it shows you the strength of those two customer programs in Australia, and obviously shows you there's some work to be done there. But 15 GT3 cars I thought was pretty decent, but just the lack of diversity within that was, I think, a fair critique of what rolled on.
Yeah, I think 15 was a great number, given there was only one international car in amongst that, and the quality was really good too. Like there was almost 10 of those you could have seen as race-winning cars, given the drivers that were in them.
Yeah, and I think what stood out was, and over the weekend, was obviously the strength of, or the relative strength of, some of the AMs in those cars as well. Schumacher and Yasser Shahin really, I guess, stood out in terms of across those AM drivers as well. And the Prince held his own, and actually the Craft Bamboo driver, as well, which his name just escapes. The
See,
yeah, that was it. He was very solid too, especially near the end, or that afternoon stint. So that was yeah, like that worked out pretty well as well, which was good. And well, not to understate Kenny Bull, but I guess we'd seen a lot of his exploits in that race since 2018. So it was no surprise to see him pretty consistent.
yeah, I think it was good. I think it was the best they could do. Again, like like Daniel and yourself, I was surprised to see 15 cars with only one international entry, because I had doubts that they'd be able to get more than 10 Australian-based cars there. So, good effort not only from the organisers but the competitors, and as well, they put in a huge effort to not lose any cars in the lead up to the race. There was a few Audis out there, mismatched body panels and whatnot. So, yeah, given the circumstances, they did a great job. There were for sure lulls throughout the race, as you'd expect with that many cars. It wasn't as exciting as previous races, but I can't complain. I feel like we all got our money's worth. It's a great race, great day, really good effort from everyone.
I'm just saying as well, and obviously it's very easy to spend other people's money, but two entries that surprised me that didn't show up there, considering the pro-am nature of it and the relatively weak field, was I would have thought the Quins would have teamed up Clark and Tony with with a gun. And as equally, while I'm no big fans of these two, I'm surprised Paul and whatever his son's name is didn't roll up as well, given the a lot of cross-class racing that they've done at this event, but also they're currently doing through Trans Ams and the Konica Minolta series and things like that as well. So I would have thought that was kind of a perfect kind of event. So I was surprised they didn't jump in, because both of them would have been relatively competitive as well.
Paul and Nash Morris, do you mean?
Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, Daniel, it's 2022. What's the Konica Minolta series?
The Fujitsu series.
Fujitsu series, yes.
The Holden
To be honest, no one watches that shit. So,
well, I watch it.
You do not. You tell me you do not watch that.
I do. It's good. Why not? You got to support Australian motorsport, mate.
We can support that by coming to the TCR event.
Yeah. Look, TCR's not for me. So I'll watch the Super 2, and I don't mind a bit of Morris in my life. I'll watch that. You go watch the TCRs then.
Well, it was Brock Feeney's Super 2 exploits that gave him the experience to handle the opening stint in the man filter Mercedes.
I was surprised he got thrown the keys. I would have thought Shane Van Gisbergen would have opened up, but he held himself pretty well during that opening stint. 2 stints actually.
You don't land that drive in supercars if you're an idiot. So I don't think he was ever in doubt. He was always going to do a pretty good job.
Well, if you believed what Garth Sanders said in the commentary, he pretty much made out no one wants to do the opening stint. So Van Gisbergen probably just pulled rank and said, "You're the rookie. You can do it."
We probably just wanted to sleep in. No one wants to get up at 3:30 in the morning.
Except us.
I don't want to. I just have to, because you're running around like a headless chicken going, "Come on, everyone, get up, get up."
Well, you were the one who didn't want to go to bed.
Of course I didn't want to go to bed. I'd had a rubbish week, and I just needed to relax for a bit with a few bourbons and talk about my feelings.
So why do we think there wasn't more makes in the GT3 field?
MPC are they just do Audis pretty much, I believe. Like, there's just so many customer cars they service, so there was always going to be a ton of Audis. There always is.
But does this perhaps show up that the customer base for other GT3 cars in Australia, or the customer setup, aren't what they could be?
I think that's fair, because I think the Audi customer sport program is obviously the benchmark there as well. And I think especially for 12-hour, like, you see more diversity in the GT series, but I think to go and do 12 hours, as good as the Groves did, and as good as Adrian Dietz's team with Wall Racing did, you can see the difference between having international manufacturer engineers, spare parts, spare cars, all that comes with that customer program. And yeah, Audi's out in front and Mercedes is not too far behind, but there's not much going on as well. And while we're throwing around critiques as well, I think Porsche Australia's support of the event this year and the Groves was diabolical. Like, we saw Audi, we saw Mercedes backing all those cars out front, but there was not much going on in the way of that Grove car or potentially Earl Bamber, or even like, imagine if you could have just grabbed a couple of the leading Carrera Cup cars, like teams, drivers, put that together and have an outright crack, like in a Class A car, but utilising those. I would have thought that was a great opportunity to, pick some low-hanging fruit that was available with this event. So I thought that was pretty weak from Porsche Australia's point of view.
Well, Gpx Martini Racing was originally announced to come over back when the event was supposed to be in March, then February. They said they were going to come along with Grupper M in the Mercedes, but those two entries fell off once the race moved to May. Yeah. And that was probably one disappointment in terms of the lead up to the race, in that announcements came out at the start of the year saying those two were going to enter. Like, there was just nothing more said about them once the race was moved. It was left to. There was an article on Sportscar 365 about a week out from the 12-hour that said that Porsche weren't going to have a factory presence and that GPX's involvement in the IGTC was going to start at Spa.
Yeah.
But I mean, in terms of transparency, like, you would have thought someone should have put a press release out saying that they weren't going to attend.
I know, because in like that, in hindsight, that was the ridiculous thing. Once the event moved, they were never coming, but supporters of the event were just strung along by appearance, like just damage control, which in the end just made it look more ridiculous. When it was evident they were never coming. So I don't think they treated the fan base with much respect in that instance.
Especially, I was heartbroken. It was going to be the first Martini car on the grid at the 12-hour since the Mercedes in 2016, and that would have been another Porsche for Brock. So,
do you guys share the same thought that it's like there was a golden opportunity for Porsche Australia with multiple teams here to promote some of their Carrera Cup teams or drivers and have a crack at the outright, or as me and Brock were talking at 3 p.m. on Sunday afternoon at the race, or just have an international car, like get the Groves to run it, but just parachute a few Porsche drivers in for a second Grove car. They've got the resources to run it, and have a few Euros in one car and the Aussies in the other.
I agree.
Good, but still, someone has to pay for it, and like Porsche is going to
Porsche
pay
Australia,
for it.
I think they've got some cash.
I'm sure they have an absolute bucket load of cash, but I think they'd want someone with a car to fund it. Like, if the Groves fund a second car, Porsche might send some more engineers, some more drivers out to jump in it, but the Groves are still going to have to fund it. They just weren't interested in doing that.
Yeah, I think it's a wasted opportunity, because look at all those AMs in the Carrera Cup as well. I would have thought you'd be able to get one interested in running it, like Emery did in the Class B car. In the end, I just thought it was, when the other two manufacturers still gave it a crack, I just thought that one was plainly obvious, and it
I agree.
Didn't get support.
It was un-Porsche-like, but look, given how many cars, I think there's 24 cars in the N24, which is just a few weeks later. So I don't know if that had something to do with it. I don't know the difference between Porsche Australia and Porsche internationally with their racing budgets and how it's all done. But let's give them a chance next year, because normally Porsche do throw a few good entries in. And I'm hoping it's just a one-off, because it's not in their character.
Well, they have been absolute jokes in Australian motorsport in terms of supporting GT racing.
Well, I was going to say that. I was going to say that, is it really surprising that Porsche Australia had an indifference to the 12-hour, because they've had an indifference to GT racing in Australia for decades. Even before they launched Carrera Cup, I mean, they didn't have a great deal of involvement I mean, it was Nations Cup before then, but they've seemingly had that they've only wanted to concentrate on the Carrera Cup and not much else.
Do you remember that time too that they stopped and ordered the Contreras brothers, who'd bought cars and had spent money racing Porsches, from entering the Nations Cup round at Eastern Creek in 2004?
Yeah.
Mm.
But back to the diversity in the GT3 class, it shows also that the fact like Techno was the McLaren customer a few years ago, and Stephen Richards was the BMW customer team that was supposed to, they were supposed to be the dealers to get people driving the cars in the country in Australia. But there's just been the only customers who want their cars prepared are Audi and Mercedes.
I'm not going to accept a Porsche bashing podcast, so we're just going to have to move on.
It's payback for the Nissan one.
Yeah, pretty much. Except I'm here to defend them.
Well, I mean, overall, I thought the GT3 grid was fine. I mean, 15 GT3 cars in even 15 GT3 cars in a normal Bathurst 12-hour. That's not a bad lineup in terms of the grid. But the big thing that got me from this year's 12-hour was the lack of cars in the lower classes. Like what
that was really disappointing.
And that's probably goes along a little bit with when we were just talking about why didn't people want to get together and run a Porsche in the GT3 class? Like what put off local teams entering cars in the lower classes?
That was one of the biggest contrasts, where we thought it'd be the other way around. We'd have limited GT3 cars, padded out by lots of diverse invitational cars. There are only 5 invitational cars across what effectively three different categories: Marks, GT2, and Porsche Cup car, or 2 Porsche Cup cars. So yeah, but to be honest, the organisers sowed their own seeds with that. From 2017 onwards, they just put more and more rules in those invitational classes to try and narrow who entered, which was always going to splash back in their face, because regardless, the event's always going to go through strong times and weak times, and that invitational classes and all the class and the other cars, like, the event needs them for its identity, but it also to have a sustainable grid. And they forced away so many cars. You think the Daytona teams no longer race there. Peugeot have entered cars before, those beautiful Fiats, but eventually they were just pushed out, and I guess the reality is what we experienced a couple of Sundays ago.
Yeah, I think all the excuses for the small field that were put out in the media, which is like that was the best way for them to sell the small grid, was that the international teams couldn't come. There was no excuse for a 20-car grid, given that there's the invitational class. It's been there for years, and I'd say, like you said, Daniel, it's a lot of the invitational class entrants have been either not felt the priority or have been felt unwanted in previous years, and the invitational class has dwindled over the last few years. And as you said, it's bit them this year, because that should have been what formed the bulk of the grid.
And it would have added another interesting dimension to the race. But like, with 20 cars and 5 cars spread across 3 classes, there was no class battles. Do you know what I mean? There was nothing to kind of entertain you from outside of the outright race. And I think that's what the event needs and was missing.
And it's obviously something 12 hours specific, because the 6 hour had 70 entries earlier this year. So, you can't blame COVID for a lack of local entries. Yeah. It's something specific to the 12 hour that people didn't want to enter. And I mean, look, and they obviously tried, like Supercars events obviously tried to fill the grid with invitational cars, because we saw the invite put out to the Super 3 teams.
On that, right? Why did you need to create their own class for them? Why, do you know what I mean? Yeah. They're invitational cars. They've always been allowed in an invitational class, do you know what I mean? Provided you meet all the lap time requirements and things like that. So that's what I didn't understand. It was like they spent years forcing all these people out through all these random regulations. And then rather than just open up the invitational class, they try and create a V8 touring car class. Which I just thought, like, just let them, like, do you know what I mean? I don't understand why it needed to be a standalone class within the race. It could have just been an invitational car. That's why I couldn't help but laugh a little bit then when none entered, because I was like, why didn't we go after Trans Am cars? Why didn't we go after TCR cars? Why didn't we go, like, do you know what I mean? It was just weird that out of all the ones that was the specific class that was targeted.
They
Even
probably
there was
had.
no Gen 1 mark cars, which is bizarre. Like the Gen 1 mark cars were built for that race.
Yeah. And
Well,
obviously no GT4, which was a complete, like, it still baffles me, and it's such a waste. But that class is perfect for this event, but it just doesn't seem to. People, like, there's cars here too, just people aren't racing them for whatever reason.
I mean, it was just in general. It's like, why didn't people with private Porsches want to enter? As we were saying before, there's old GT3 cars, which, you know, aren't the latest ones, but I'm sure if someone had an older Lambo or something like that, I'm sure that they'd have put them in the invitational class.
And we're not for a second saying it's cheap and it's easy to
No.
do. We're not like, not obviously, yeah, just saying, yes, if you've got a car, you just go out and race it for 12 hours. It is expensive, but it's just, do you know what I mean? For people who have the cars and they race them in other categories, and, you know, you look at, they do a Prod Sports 3 or 4 hour, or numbers of privateer entries and things like that, doing multiple driver endurance racing. I just would have thought a few may have banded together for this one. So.
And it's a bit of a worry going forward then, if, like, the event's going to be fine next year. The internationals will be back. There'll be, say you get 10 to 15 international GT3 cars come out next year. Add that to the 20 that ran this year. That gives you a field of, say, 35-ish. That's fine. That's what we had in 2020. Obviously, you know, we'd love a 55 car grid, but 35's all right. But if they can only attract 5 non-GT3 cars this year, are they effectively now hanging the future of the event on GT3 and international cars?
Well, but I was going to say that, like, that's why it was silly that it took this for them to realize. But I hope they've learnt the lesson now, or like, you know, aware that you can't have a race dependent on international cars when, you know, there's lots of health or geopolitical reasons of why. Do you know what I mean? That's going to impact the ability for international cars to come all the way out to Australia on an annual basis. So that's for next year. If we just revert to, oh, it's fine, international cars will be back next year, then we're just setting ourselves up for, you know, a similar issue down the right line. There needs to be a foundation that can support this race year in, year out, regardless of what happens internationally.
It's hard, like there's not a lot of money in this country, and I think the health of Australian GT in general for the last few years has shown that. So it's expensive. I think there is a lot of I think it's quite hard in the slower classes. From what I've heard, it's really difficult to be in a slower class car around there in that race. It's a bit of a car killer, and I actually think it's more so than the regulations pushing him out. I think a lot of guys just choose not to take their pride and joy there because they can't afford to get fenced by a pro Euro guy, you know, halfway through the race, which has happened. So it is weird. It's definitely in a point where it's finding its feet again. I don't know where it's going to end. I understand what Daniel's saying. I just don't know how achievable it is.
Well, I think the ones that stand out that were written out, or like not written out, but obviously made it that difficult, was the Daytona prototypes. So they were given these, like, even though they had a lap time that they had to drive to, on top of that, they were given air restrictions and other limitations that just made it pointless for them to run. And you think they supported the event from 2013. I think it was the first year that one ran, and to see that fall out, we always had those cool random BMWs that was it Anthony Gilbert, I think, ran one for a while, and things like that. And they're the ones that, you know, make the race interesting, and support it, and obviously and are willing to support it, were lost to the event because some people wanted to have like a Spa 24 hours of 55 GT3 cars, which I personally don't want that, and I don't think that's long-term sustainable for a race based so far out of Europe.
Guess one other thing too is, like, there was no doubt it was well, in my opinion it was a quality 20 car grid. And watching the TV coverage, they made it interesting on TV. Watching back the TV coverage, you don't see any empty track. There's cars on screen the whole time, and there was enough, the way the rules were in the race, that it kept the race interesting. That the lead kept changing, positions kept changing. So it wasn't a bad race to watch on TV. But I mean, trackside, they need more than 20 cars, because we, as good as the racing was, we also looked at a lot of blank tarmac, particularly after things like safety car periods, and also that with 15 GT3 cars, they're running around at a similar pace. So it takes a lot for them to get spread out.
Yeah, I think Shane summed it up after one of his stints, and he just said it was quite boring because there's not enough cars out there. But look, they had to get it back on. I think having a 20-car grid was better than skipping the race for another year. So it's back on.
Agreed. Yeah.
It was a decent crowd considering. Let's just wait 8 months for the next one, 7 months, whatever it is now.
That was
And,
interesting comments by Van Gisbergen when he said that as well, because I was told that if you have any feedback or critique the event, you're not a true fan. So I don't know where that sits for him as well. So it was good to hear his feedback.
So the race this year, in terms of the television coverage, it had an all-Australian commentary team. With Radio Le Mans took the feed, but they didn't send any of their crew out. And there was a lot of praise for the commentary team in a lot of quarters. And in fact, there's been some things written basically saying that they don't think going forward they didn't miss the international commentary team, and going forward perhaps we don't need them. What do you guys think?
I'm going to get in first because Daniel's got his boxing gloves on. So I'm going to get in first. I think the commentary was pretty good, considering like Garth's quite a good broadcaster. I did miss the Radio Le Mans guys. Obviously, they commentate the internationals week in, week out. So it is good. I think it gives it a good international flavour. And it also probably makes it a bit easier to listen to for the Europeans that tune in to watch them, because it's, you know, familiar voice, familiar sort of things going on. But I think, considering, apart from Garth blowing his voice out, I think they did pretty good. And Richard Crowell, he does step up at the 12-hour. I do enjoy his commentary at the 12 hours. So for me, commentary team is good.
So it was fine, as Brock said. Like, it was more than capable, more than they commentated, they delivered information. It was fine. Where I did have some thoughts was, and I especially felt it rewatching the first couple of stints, it felt like 3 Supercar guys selling a race to V8 Supercar fans. Do you know what I mean? Like, it obviously was a local flavour with local commentators, but it didn't feel like they were commentating on or to sports car racing fans or international fans. It felt like a local broadcast for local people. And I feel like that's what's missing, and that's why, as great as it was having Garth Tander, who's raced in the event, and that is a good insight. But that's why you need international commentators and people who know international endurance racing. I felt we really missed that nuance of the experience sports car racing people that Radio Le Mans bring, and good on them. But as much as Chad Nalen, Richard Crowell and Garth Tander tried and did well that day, like it is miles away from Radio Le Mans who do it week in, week out, know the drivers, know the cars, and now have been coming to the event for almost 10 years. So I think for anyone to say that it was a better broadcast and there was no need to bring anyone back, I'm like, clearly there's an agenda behind that, because that is so far from reality. It's not funny.
I think you could argue that in the last few years with the RLM commentary team, it's perhaps been maybe too internationally weighted. Like you had Hindhoff and Johnny Palmer in the main commentary box with Richard Craill, and then you had Shay Adams in the pits. That's usually Mark Beretta. So I can agree maybe it needs a bit more of a local balance, but also the whole race is sold as Australia's international enduro, and given it's a Intercontinental GT Challenge round, I think it has to have international commentary or international commentators in the mix.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Yeah, I think that's a really good point you make, Luke. I think it is Australia's international race. That's what they advertise it as. Run on the international BOP, international car, international drivers. Like, yeah, bring back RLM for next year for sure. But considering they did
and they're synonymous with the event now too. Do you know what I mean? Like the rise of the event domestically and internationally are tied with their involvement. So I think you can't underestimate that. And one example that I think at least spelled out for me was the commentators explained to the audience that in the 12-hour, it was a race against time. It wasn't a race counting laps. And I thought that type of cutting edge analysis for people who watch endurance racing 24 hours, 12 hours, 9 hours, etc. I was like, they were basically commentating to the lowest common denominator, which they even said later on, if you're used to watching the Bathurst 1000. And I was like, that for me, that's where it missed the mark. It was trying to
that's not the choice of the commentators. Like, that's the choice of Channel 7 and the producers. And obviously they've looked at it and gone, we're going to have a local audience. It's going to be Australian commentators. A lot of them are going to be supercar fans. So we're going to have to cater to them.
Yeah, well, maybe it'd be fascinating to read the ratings, but I think next year, and maybe as a one-off, as we said, it was fine. Like, do you know what I mean? It was a capable enough. There was commentary, and it went over some pictures, but it was fairly one-dimensional. And when next year, when the opportunity to have RLM back is a no-brainer.
I think from some of the commentary I've seen around, it's pretty much guaranteed RLM will be a part of the mix again next year. One advantage to having RLM involved is that they play the commentary across their Radio Show Limited networks, which has got a worldwide following. Like there's people who listen to that like it's their local radio station, and they just listen to sports cars 24/7.
In fairness, they did carry it across the RS1 this year as well, which was
no, definitely, but presumably that's because they're coming back next year. But if like some have suggested that they didn't miss the international commentary and they didn't miss the no RLM involvement, well then presumably if that was ever done away with, then you lose the race getting carried on their network.
Yes, yeah.
So you'd have to think about that. But I mean, as an alternative, I mean, does it have to be RLM in terms of the international commentators? Because you've also got the SRO commentary team who commentate on all the GT World Challenge Europe rounds and the GT World Challenge Europe Endurance rounds of David Addison and John Watson.
Once again, they know endurance racing. They know the international cars, its drivers, teams, cars. So they've got that nuance. So I think that they once again would be fine. But I would go back to after 10 years, give or take now, I think Radio Le Mans is kind of synonymous with the event as well. So I think that when people think of the event, they think of Radio Le Mans and vice versa.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I guess if I
don't
wanted
get me wrong,
to
David Addison is an absolute legend, so I'd have him here in a heartbeat.
Well, if I drew a really long bow, I could say that, David Addison, he commentated on the Bathurst 24 hours for Channel 7, and he did the Bahrain V8 Supercar round for Channel 7 in, I think, 2008. And John Watson did some commentary for Channel 9 in the late 90s and early 2000s at the Australian Grand Prix. So that's my link to Australia there.
Maybe the solution is a team
Johnny
of
Palmer.
Johnny Palmer, number one, Hindhoff, David Addison, and Waddy.
All right, okay. Let's go one step further. Give me your dream Bathurst 12-hour commentary team for 2023.
I think I just did.
Yep.
Oh no!
You got to give me pit reporters too.
In the pits. I can't believe I've gone blank on his name. He's from Radio Le Mans.
Nick Damon.
Nick Damon in the pits with Parker Johnston would be in the pits with him.
Parker Johnstone.
Yeah, one of the great broadcasters.
I will concur. Like I'd love Nick Damon to come to the 12-hour. Love Nick Damon to come to the 12-hour. How about you, Brock?
Yeah, you got to have Nick there for sure. Obviously Johnny Palmer. Oh, Daniel's going to hate this. I would actually like to hear Scaife commentate the 12-hour. Yeah, it's a big call, but I don't mind him. I'd go Scaife, Richard Crowell, and Johnny Palmer with Nick Damon and Chad in the pits.
That's actually an interesting point. Like, why? Like, it's a Supercars media produced television broadcast, and Neil Crompton, for instance, was there this year. Why weren't Crompton and Scaife part of the commentary team? Crompton was hosted in 2020, but Scaife's never. He raced there in the 2017 race, but he's had no broadcast involvement in the event.
Probably a week off for them. They're probably like, thank God we don't have to. They can actually watch the race rather than being cooped up in a commentary box the whole time. They probably don't want to do it.
Didn't they have a race the weekend after or something? Or maybe was it the weekends after?
Yeah, Winton. My commentary team, I would go. Richard Craile's the voice of the race, so he's there. Johnny Palmer, I agree. I like Johnny Palmer up there. I'm going to bring David Addison in as the third commentator. No, I don't mind John Hindhoff, but I do quite like David Addison. Then in the pits, I have to agree. I have to go Nick Damon.
If we're doing just like the A team, no restrictions or anything, I'd also like Ted Kravitz in the
I've never heard Ted Kravitz. Oh, no, actually, I was going to say I'd never heard Ted Kravitz do anything outside F1, but he used to host the British Touring Car Championship telecasts with Louise Goodman.
Yeah, and I'd also like James Taylor does a great job, but I'd love the King, Michael Massey, to be the race director as well.
I was going to say
something we can void.
I was going to say
because then we go car racing.
We heard James Taylor's voice on the telecast so many times that he almost was part of the commentary team. But yeah, I think to finish off my pit lane team, I think Chad Nayland, he's quite good in the pit lane.
He does a good job, isn't he? Yeah, he does do a good job. We have
he's energetic. I'll give you.
We have really good broadcasters in this country. We probably take them for granted that they're all really quite good.
And then my final pit reporter, I could go totally off-piste.
Well, you're going to put Mario Andretti in there?
No, I'd go for... I always loved John Brady on the Bathurst telecast back in the day. But if we're being realistic...
ScoMo.
Well, no, someone like Andrew Jones when he did it in V8s.
Oh, yeah.
He was quite good in the pits.
Tappy was good in the pits.
Tappy was great in the commentary box. But I'm trying to keep it realistic, but I'd happily get John Tapp and John Brady into it. But okay. My dream 2023 commentary team will go David Addison, Richard Craill, Johnny Palmer, then in the pits, Nick Damon, Chad Nayland, Andrew Jones, and hosted by Mark Beretta, because I'll assume it's on Channel 7 again. Maybe they can drag Wilco up there, bring him out of retirement, and have him as the sidekick.
What about Koshi?
Koshi, No. I don't think he's got any interest. They did give him a fire suit in 2007, though, from memory. And he wore it on Sunrise. But that's getting very off track. So we'll get back on track in a minute. We'll take a quick break and be back shortly. Breakthrough Health and Wellness. The Breakthrough 60-Day Challenge combines a highly effective weight loss program and a high-end personal fitness experience without costly memberships. In a culture of flash workouts and going hard, Breakthrough have taken a more sustainable approach and developed the perfect program that will not only get you fit and healthy, but also help you shed stubborn weight that you thought was never going to budge. Breakthrough will offer new inspiration and goals that will lead to life changes you can easily maintain. Each week, Breakthrough offer interesting muscular endurance, strengthening and functional movement exercises with a training app that will rival any workout you have done at the gym. For more information, visit mybreakthrough.com.au. That's MYBreakthru and follow Breakthrough on Facebook and Instagram. Welcome back to the podcast. The sporting regulations for the 12-hour this year, do you think there were too many rules, particularly around the AM driving times and the compulsory pit stops?
Well, the AM driver time, I don't have an issue with that. That's a pretty standard rule. Do you know what I mean? Or AM or pro, total number of hours and all that kind of thing, continuous hours. I think that's fine. But yeah, some of the rules were so convoluted. No one likes the wave around rule, but you can kind of see why it was introduced for this year's event with such a weaker field. But within that, then, to have all these sub-rules within that, it can only happen between, hour 3 and hour 9, and it can be applied, but it's up to the race director's discretion. Who wrote these rules? Michael Massey? Do you know what I mean? Either have the rule or don't. Don't have, all these kind of, gotcha kind of things within it. I think that's where they went wrong. So have the wave around, but do the wave around for the whole race, or don't do it at all. So hopefully next year we won't do it at all. But just saying that I thought that was unnecessary to have all these intricacies inside the rule as well. So I think that was one that was unnecessary, but hopefully the whole rule disappears next year. But Brock, one thing we will agree on, the Australian specific rules of no weaving behind the safety car once it flicks its lights off, that can go in a bin, because that has cost the race now so many issues because of these little, this is an international race run under SRO regulations. We should take an international rule book in terms of what happens on track, because that's so difficult for drivers who come from all over the world to just do something completely different here, and it actually hurts the race. The number of years where we've had cars in contention taken out because they weaved down Conrod Straight, it's ridiculous. And the other one's the overlapping rule. Obviously, Kenny Ball full on overtook someone, which that's
not just someone.
Yeah, multiple. So that makes sense. But yeah, pinging cars for overlapping, let's just go with what's standard in GT3 racing the world over. So
I think it almost is gets to the point where it stops being, it takes away from the motor race. When we're not going to allow the lucky or the wave around, but we're going to send you on a green flag the next lap. So if track conditions are that bad, why are we going green 2 minutes later? And it is a motor race, and at some point we have to go car racing, and I guess that's why we need to bring the king, just get Michael Massey in there, because it is a car race, Daniel, and that's what we're all there.
It is. It's a car race, not a lottery. And
that's right. So let's go racing.
That's where
I thought it was a good point that you made, actually. Yeah, I agree.
I think with regards to the race regulations, one of the things with the IGTC is that it's just supposed to be a collection of different races from different continents. I don't think the rules, and I don't think Rattel even advocates that the rules have to be the same for all the events.
They don't have to, but I think all they do is just catch people out, and it ruins the race. So it doesn't.
I agree
mandate,
with what you guys are saying, but I don't think it's an SRO priority to get the rules in sync with the other rounds. Although I say that, I'm about to contradict myself, because do you remember, was it for, I think, 2019, the 12-hour organisers originally announced a bunch of rule changes which included maximum stint lengths of, I think, 65 minutes and compulsory timed pit stops. And there was such a backlash to it that they ended up dropping it before the race started.
Yeah, but once again, equally, they're ridiculous rules wherever you go.
Yeah, but I mean, those are SRO rules, so there's some silly rules on
both sides.
I guess we want to take a hybrid, some of the the Australian rules, and mix them with some of the European rules. But I think obviously the organisers felt that the only way to get the AMs to enter their cars, which in effect is what was required with the majority customer focused bunch of entries in this year's race, that they had to design the rules to make them feel like that unless you had a big crash or a major mechanical failure, no one was ever going to be out of contention in the race. Because every time there was a safety car, people got the lucky dogs. The compulsory pit stops, well, the 9 compulsory pit stops, meant that there was no one was going to lose time in the pits. So and particularly other rules like an AM driver had to do a stint after 1 o'clock, was it, or midday?
Just the second half of the race. Yeah.
Yeah, so they obviously designed the rules, I guess, thinking that was the only way they'd get enough entries and try and entice the AMs to enter.
I think on that wave around rule, my opinion, if you're going to have a 10-minute safety car because someone's in a gravel trap somewhere, if it's a full call safety car for 10 minutes, you may as well do wave arounds. Like, why not? I mean, if they're going to, if they eventually go to code 60s and slow zones like, a lot of Europe does, then sure, you don't get your lap back and it's just pretty much a full-on endurance race. But if they're going to keep, having these pause periods in the race every hour or so, why not get your lap back? I don't see a problem with it. It just makes the end of the race better.
I guess my only thing is and I appreciate this year's an event on its own. Like next year, we're all assuming it's going to be back to full pro lineups. They'll get rid of the amount of compulsory pit stops and minimum time in the pits. So this is just a general thought, but to me, one of the essential parts of an endurance race is good pit work and staying on the lead lap. Mandating how long you have to spend in the pits, how many times you have to come into the pits, and allowing any time you lose a lap that the next safety car you can get them back. I just find that goes completely against the essence of endurance racing.
Maybe they could do, I don't mind the idea of timed pit stops because these aren't, especially this year, they're not professional crews. So they're not F1 crews, they are just sort of, mates of mates of mates and never done it before. They're under big pressure. So if they've got 2 minutes, it's plenty of time to not stuff it up. Maybe they could do pit stop times based on stint length like they do in Nürburgring. Maybe that would be a better, more consistent way to do that. You can't fool it as much as, say, Craft Bamboo did it. But,
well, they basically made a mockery of the whole thing, didn't they?
Yeah, which proves, there's holes to be shot through it, and next year everyone will probably do that if that rule maintains. I don't mind, because to me, endurance racing shouldn't be won or lost by your pit crew. And maybe that's because I'm not as old school as you guys. But I don't have a problem with mandatory pit stop lengths personally.
As long as they're not ridiculous. Like I don't disagree with you in terms of safety and especially around this year's event. But as long as they're not like, do you know what I mean? Like say they're a minute or, do you know what I mean? A minute 20 or something. Sometimes when they're 2 and 3 minutes, it's ridiculous. So I think in that sense, as long as they're manageable, I just don't like mandatory number of pit stops. Like I think that's if you can.
Yeah, I don't think you need a mandatory number. I agree with that. That's unnecessary.
Yeah, I was like that was, and obviously that's where Craft Bamboo jumped on. But it's like, yeah, the more rules you make, the more random ways people are going to come to try and get around them. So it's kind of like self-defeating in that way.
You could just say if you're coming in to do 4 tires and fuel, or 2 tires and fuel, it's a minute stop, and that's it. That's just not negotiable. But if you get a puncture, there's no time limit. If you're coming in to put some race tape on it, no time limit. For window net falls down, no time limit. But if it's at least 2 tires and any fuel, it's 2-minute stop. Although that would probably stuff the race up at the end if someone did with a splash and dash. I don't know. Get Michael. He'll sort it out.
Yeah, less regulations, the better. Obviously, from a safety and financial point of view, sometimes there needs to be some things around it. But yeah, I think next year should be a lot cleaner, straightforward race, which is understandable because they can have a depth of grid that can support that.
I just thought the amount of rules also it made the race very hard to follow on TV. Because the running order just kept getting jumbled up in the early stages. All of a sudden, different cars were leading, and you were just like, "Well, how are they leading?"
Yeah, like when the Lambo led, and
yeah, it's just. I mean, it was what it was. I guess I get maybe that's what they wanted to just to. It definitely kept you on your toes, and it showed everyone was in with a chance. Anyway, as we were saying, it's unlikely the same rule book will get carried forward into 2023. What did we think of qualifying for this year's race? And the late change from a shootout to the 2 15-minute 5-car sessions.
Okay, I have a few points on this. So I don't have an issue with that being the qualifying session, if that's just how it was intended to be from the start. I have an issue with the reason they gave for it, which was they're struggling with tyre warm-up, yet they started the race in freezing cold conditions and did 2 slow warm-up laps and were able to push quite comfortably, and no one had any problems. So I thought that was a cop-out. Yeah, so I don't mind it, but the reason they gave for it was cop-out, in my opinion.
I fully agree. It was advertised as a top 10 shootout, and whilst the 2 top 5 10-minute whatever it was session was good to look at and obviously had a last gap pole winner, it's the reasons for making it seemed really haphazard and really strange. So yeah, I agree with Brock. But for what happened on Sunday morning, to be concerned about tyre warm-up on Sunday afternoon in relatively warm conditions, I really struggled with that.
Because on that basis, they needed 4 warm-up laps at almost racing speed before they could start the race. So it was just bizarre.
I thought what they replaced the shootout with, I thought they were really exciting we were watching them from Murray's, and they were quite exciting to sit there and watch. And the back and forth, particularly between Mostert and Van der Linde, that was really exciting. But I mean, in reality, it was no real different to the earlier qualifying. Like it's just cars doing a bunch of laps trying to set a time. It wasn't the whole selling point of a shootout is that you get one chance. The pressure is just to do one lap, and there's no sort of crescendo in the fastest guy going out and trying to set pole. So, I mean, I can usually take or leave shootouts, but I think in that sense, I'd rather a shootout than what we had. In reality, it's just another normal qualifying session with less cars on the road. You're getting multiple chances to do hot laps.
Part of me wonders if it was a little bit of sort of protection to potentially losing a car. So obviously in qualifying they could take their time, warm the tyres, and then push. In the shootout, if it was a little bit sort of loose on that one lap, I wonder if they were looking at the grid and going, we can't afford to lose a car. And based on what happened in 2020 qualifying, I wonder if they were a bit gun shy and said, you know what, let's just can it, let them warm up their tyres so that we give it the best chance. Because if they lost 3 cars in that shootout, it would have been a disaster. So I wonder how much, I wonder if we had a normal size grid, I suspect they may have still run the shootout, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean they were definitely worried about losing cars. I mean, look what happened with the Super Barn Audi. In previous years, cars have been crashed and they haven't run, even though there's been spare cars sitting in the paddock. They've never turned laps in the race, and then and that ruffled a few feathers. There were a lot of comments about replacement cars being used, which I had no problem actually. I think they should always, if there's a spare car in the paddock and you crash it during practice, so I think you should be able to trot out a spare car if you've got one there. But yeah, no, there was definitely a priority placed on getting all those 20 cars onto the start line. Dan, do you think they should keep that sort of emphasis on getting all the entries to the start line going forward, even if there's a 45 car grid?
No, I think once qualifying's concluded, that's it. It's just part of your race. But if you ride off a car at the start of quali and before the end of quali, you're like, or maybe within like an hour after quali, you nominate a new car, then I reckon you should be allowed to swap. Hey, you paid your entry? Yeah, absolutely, you should be allowed to.
What do you reckon, Daniel?
Yeah, the more the merrier. Like, if you've come all the way there, of course. I think, yeah, why would you try and force cars out, even with 45? Yeah, it makes no sense. So, yeah, if you've got a spare car, roll it out, start at the back, and, yeah, there you go.
But looking ahead to 2023, what do we want to see when we rock back up there next year?
Manti.
Gripper.
More Porsches.
Gpx Racing.
No, I think
more Porsches.
Ultimately, we want to see BMWs. We want to see Lamborghinis. We want to see McLarens. We want to see Audis. We want to see Mercedes. We want to, do you know what I mean? I think that's, obviously we won't see Bentleys, but never know. Maybe we might see a private Bentley run. But yeah, just some diversity of cars and, some strong international lineups. And I assume it'll go back pro next year, which will be good. Provided it's adhered to and it's consistent across the field, I don't mind a pro-am event. So I'm not absolutely tied to that. But just, do you know what I mean? It was great having the likes of Stoltz, Angle, Vanderlinde,
Barker.
Winky, Barker. He was outstanding. So, do you know what I mean? Just, just that international flair.
If I could have honestly one thing for that race next year, at least 15 non-GT3 cars.
Nice.
That's what the race was built on. We had enough GT3 cars this year. We just need 15 GT4s, TCRs, Invitationals, Super 3 cars, whatever. Even some of the 6-hour cars like it used to be. That's what I would want. What would you want, Luke?
Yeah, look, I'm definitely the same with the lower class cars. They make the race, in my opinion. There's a good bunch of the fan base who just want GT3 cars or don't care that no lower class cars are there. But for me, the lower class cars help make the race, and I love seeing such a diversity in the type of cars that entered. I've got one of my favourite photos I took from the 12-hour in 2013 was I was standing at Forest Elbow and I've got a Ferrari come out the inside of a Ford Falcon FPV, and I think that summed up why I loved that race, because you couldn't get a bigger contrast to car. So I mean, I'm sure it'll be a multi-class race next year, and I'm sure you'll get a couple of Marks enter, a couple of Porsches. I'm sure the KTM. Maybe we need to look at trying to get some more GT2 cars to enter alongside the KTM. If there's no interest in GT4, Some people might be interested in driving the slightly quicker GT2 cars.
Slightly quicker. That thing was an absolute rocket ship.
And until it broke down right in front of us in the second hour.
Yeah, I think it clipped the wall, but that was a properly fast car.
The other thing I'm looking forward to, and obviously not saying we expect it for 2023, but hopefully moving in there, I would love to see it go back to a 4-day event. So have some running on Thursday, and we have a Thursday night session.
The thing is, a night practice is hard, though, given the time of year. If we just go back to 22 for a sec, that Friday night practice session was one of the highlights of the weekend. That was awesome.
Electrifying.
Watching the car, we sat at the chase for it, and just watching it started in, it was still the sun had just set, or was just setting when they came out, and there was a red flag which helped it as well, because that stopped the session, and then they got back going again, and which meant it ran a little bit later into the dark still. And for probably the last 25 minutes of that session, it was pitch black, and it was cool to see a practice session as opposed to seeing them just at 5 a.m. 6 a.m. rather, running around in the dark. But I think to do a practice session like that, I mean, you'll have to run it at 8 o'clock in February to get any kind of dark running.
So do it on the Thursday. Only started at like 1 or something. Run your support cars or do your track sessions or your sponsor sessions or whatever you want to call it. And so that way your marshals aren't doing a full day into the night. Yeah, there's just like an afternoon session, 1 till 9 or whatever it is. And there you go.
That would be cool.
I think we should acknowledge there are a few things they got really good this year. Like obviously that practice session was a big win. I think starting the race an hour earlier was a big win. There are actually some decent gains this year, so good on the organisers and supercars for that.
And good on them for going green Sunday morning too, because I was not told they were going to do that.
No one thought, and the fog was worse in person than on TV. No one thought that race was going to start, and they did it. And all of the Australian drivers complained, and none of the European ones did. And full credit to James Taylor, because we witnessed something that I've never seen before. And just seeing those cars cutting through such heavy fog when it's pitch black is something probably no one's ever seen at that track ever.
And probably won't see again anytime soon.
That hour was just magical. So full credit to them for running it and the European drivers for getting on with it. And Luke and I spoke to Ben Barker after the race, and he said it was pretty bad. But they got through it. I think we only lost one marked car, and I don't know whether that was fog related or not, but you know what? It's not meant to be easy.
Yeah, I agree. And so I hope they maintain that 5:15 start in February as well, because obviously it won't be the same, but at least it gives us some more night running, which will be awesome. And I was gonna say, credit where credit's due for them running getting the event started and doing it soundly, and for the drivers who drove to the conditions too. That was really, really good.
They managed it really well as well, throughout that morning, rather than just sort of canning it, which I feel like would be the standard reaction of just red flag it and we'll come back in 3 hours. They didn't. They absolutely pushed to run that under green flag as much as possible. And I was shocked. I think everyone was. So that was such a good effort. It was really, really well run.
Pleasantly, I had the IndyCar race up there on my phone ready to go, and then was rudely interrupted by the call to go green, and almost dropped the phone.
Well, we all got up at 4:30 in the campsite, and we were all standing around going, "There's no way this is going to start."
Probably something to share with this podcast as well is that, I don't know if it's yours or Brock's, that footage right up at McPhillamy on the fence with the cars coming around through the fog. That's for people who weren't there, that really sells what it was like for those drivers on those opening laps.
Yeah, that was a great spot to stand. And the one of the good things was with the extra night running, because I mean basically we had an hour and a half, but usually at the 12-hour, the biggest talking point when we get there on the Thursday or the Friday is trying to work out where we're going to watch the start from. And invariably we've watched usually from Hell Corner, but I've watched 2014. I watched it from McPhillamy. 2017, I watched it from Caltex Chase, and that was the year, and it was missed on the TV coverage. But an Audi came out of the chase just in front of Ridges and put a wheel on the curb and then did a 360. And I've never found anyone else who saw it, but I swear blind it did a 360 and kept going on the first lap. But anyway, that aside, with the extra night running, it meant that we could watch the start down at Murray's and then hop in the car and after watching the first half hour and drive up to Reed Park, hop out, and then we saw a good half hour of night running and then saw the sunrise.
Yeah, that was wicked, man.
Like that's something you won't get to do in a February 12-hour anyway, because the nighttime part of it where they usually start is not long enough.
I think like all races have a vibe or an atmosphere. But when we went up the top, Luke, and we were standing just on the exit of Reed Park, I've just never experienced anything like that. It was just, I don't know, it just had such a cool feeling to it. It was just such an interesting experience. I've never experienced anything like that. It just felt so unique. And when we were standing there, I was just like, I'm really going to soak this up, because I don't think I'm ever going to see anything like this with my own eyes again. Like just that fog with that darkness at that part of the track, like, I don't know. It was so cool.
I think there's many parts of this year's 12-hour that we're really lucky and glad we went, because it won't. You're never going to get that sort of weather in a February 12-hour. It really was awesome. And maybe in February, maybe they can look at this. Doesn't work for Channel 7 leading into the 6 p.m. news TV coverage, but to start the race closer to 5 a.m. in summer to give it a bit longer dark.
You know what this year taught us we need? We need some very carefully calibrated and calculated amounts of smoke and smoke machines.
Set them up around the track and...
Yeah, like forget Bernie's sprinklers. We need some damn fog. Because that makes it way cooler.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe as a compromise, if we in February, if you can't do a night practice because it's too late, even just a dusk practice, even on Friday evening, like run them from 6 to 7 or something, or something a bit different. That's probably the closest you could get without, as Daniel said, putting the program back on the Friday, which I think is a really good idea. But if you didn't want to do that, if you could just run it a little bit later, it would give a different look to a bunch of photos anyway, if nothing else.
One other thing I do want to mention, and I think this is just, again, full credit to the organisers and supercars, but once again allowing the combined sedans as a sport category. That is very much a grassroots category. Though there's some big dollar cars in it, they allow them back every year, full TV coverage. The category responds by coming up with 50 cars year in, year out, but I think it's really good they haven't turned their nose up at them and go, no, we're going to run a supercar or an ARG sort of support category. So I just, once again, I think that is a big credit for allowing that, because it's the only chance those guys ever get to race at that track. And I think that category, the more they run as a support at that event, they have slowly become a part of that event. And I don't know about you guys, but I associate the sports sedans and the combined sedans very much with the 12-hour. And I just wanted to acknowledge that as well as a bit of a tip of the hat. I think that's pretty cool.
Oh, I do. I agree totally. Like, I guess the only thing is we had improved production for many years, and that was considered a sort of a staple of the 12-hour support category too. And they got rid of them a couple of years ago. But the combined sedans were great, and the fact that so many of the cars in the combined sedans were sports sedans, I mean, that XE Falcon, that grey one, how good was that? That was the car of the meeting.
There's not much XE Falcon under it, though. I promise you that. But
I don't know enough about the car. As long as it didn't have a Chev motor.
I think it may. I don't know. I'll find out. The good thing about combined sedans is they, improved production cars can run in it. So
definitely,
yeah. For both worlds, because you get IP, you get production, you get sports sedans, you get, oh my god, you just get everything. X supercars. So obviously Jack LeBrock smoked everyone. Yeah.
Well, he only smoked them because Brad Shields had some trouble in the Fiat, and the Birrell set and Lacey had some trouble with their Camaros. So
yes, but anyway, keep doing that. It's very important.
What do you think of the other two supports? I'm not sure about the 86s and the Aussie racing cars.
I like the 86s. Yeah, I've always liked the 86s. I don't know. They're good. They sort of remind me of like the MGs back in the day. It's just there's more of them.
Yeah. What would be your dream 3 support categories at the 12-hour?
I'd love to see Super 2 run there. I think that would be good. I think that would attract maybe a bit more of a crowd, definitely the supercar crowd, if the Super 2s could run there. So I go Super 2, combined sedans, and probably get the Carrera Cups out there.
What about you, Daniel?
So I would go Formula Ford.
Yeah.
Sports sedans, combined touring, whatever you want to call it. And then historic Group A, Group C.
I'm like you too. I'd keep the combined sedans. I'd bring back the Group S, historic production sports cars, which they had the last couple of years. Mainly for the main reason that where they were set up in the paddock was right near our campsite, and at the end of it, they always had a very nice little store set up where you could get your golf Steve McQueen jackets and golf merchandise and everything. I'd bring them back just on that alone. But I thought those sort of cars suited the GT style event as well. And my third one, it'd be a toss up between. I'll go improved production. Bring back I was toss up maybe Formula Ford, but improved production. I think I really liked it when they were there. You saw some really cool cars that would turn out for that category. All right, final question. Give me one change you would make to the 12-hour. If you had the magic wand, you could do one change, anything you want to it.
Go on, Daniel. Daniel's got 6.
Like in terms of regulation or in terms of
anything?
Anything. You've been given the reins and you can make one change for next year's event onwards.
Because part of me wants to get rid of that weaving behind the safety car rule. That's strong motivation. But no, I think I'd double down on what I said before and do a Thursday evening session, night session. Start the event Thursday afternoon.
It's an easy one, man. It's a real easy one. 24 hours. You get to see him run at night time a bit then.
I love that. Well, we've all got a similar theme, and I'm ripping my idea off Will Hagen, who mentions it during the commentary of the inaugural Bathurst 12-hour back in 1991. And I love this idea, and I've always thought it'd be awesome if it was done. Totally wouldn't work for sort of the way they want to do TV to lead into the news, but his suggestion, which I love the sound of, was that you start the race at midnight on the Saturday night and run it through to midday on the Sunday, obviously. But his selling point was that you could have a big sort of carnival atmosphere leading up to the race start at midnight. You could gear it around, I suppose, having your Ferris wheels and your things like that, and make it a real car. You could even have a lead in 2 or 3 hour enduro or something on the Saturday night for something leading in, and that'd give us 6 hours or so of nighttime driving. So it'd be very much a half enduro. And then as a benefit of that, it'd mean you'd have to have night practice on the Friday or the Thursday, because every driver then would do a stint, at least one stint in the race in the in the dark.
Nah, I've never seen a Ferris wheel at Bathurst.
No, was it Malaysia 12-hour? They did something similar to that, Luke, and I didn't mind it. Yeah, I agree. I think you just run into some troubles commercially, but yeah, no, I think the idea has merit.
I guess this is the most important question to finish on. Do you prefer the Sun Energy car, blue or orange?
Yeah, orange with black wheels.
What about you, Daniel?
Orange.
Orange.
Now, you know what he should do? He should do the mirror. So one side's the orange and the other side's the blue. That would be cool.
I preferred it blue in all the photos I saw, and then I saw it roll around orange, and I'm like, nope, I prefer it orange. Once I saw it in person, that sold me straight away. So that's about where we'll wrap up our Bathurst 12-hour chat. Thank you to Daniel and Brock for joining me, and thank you to Breakthrough Health and Wellness for their continued support of the podcast. We'll be back soon with another episode.